Shmai, my name is Dr. Daniel Jones. I'm the current Deputy Chair for Terms and Conditions on the Welsh Resident Doctors Committee, and I'm a Public Health Doctor at Public Health Wales. This is a presentation about the new Welsh Resident Doctor contract that is coming in from August 2026, and it is primarily aimed at new F1s coming to Wales. We do have other resources for F1s going elsewhere, so on our YouTube channel we have a presentation about the 2002 contract in Northern Ireland and Scotland and the 2016 contract in England. So the first thing to say is that we use a lead employer arrangement in Wales, which may be slightly different in other nations. The idea of the single lead employer, which is now quite well established here, is to avoid duplication of processes, particularly as you rotate between different placements and different locations. And so you will have a single lead employer throughout your training, which is NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership, which in turn is part of Linda NHS Trust. And NWSSP will handle all of your employment checks, contractual matters, any payroll issues. They will be a central point throughout your foundation training and in any training programmes that you subsequently do in Wales. Meanwhile, the hospital you're at will be your host employer, and it will be part of a host organisation. And so in Wales, we have 7 health boards that typically host resident doctors, and they are the host employers and will deal with more local matters such as facilities, which rotas and which departments you will be in, induction, so on and so forth. And again, the idea of this single lead employer arrangement is to avoid any duplication of checks, particularly as you're rotating going through your training. The new contract is notable because it's taken quite a break with the previous 2002 contract we did have, and it now uses an hours-based pay system, which is 4 main elements: basic pay, additional hours, out-of-hours top-up, and then any on-call payments for people who do non-resident on-call, and that will all add up to a total pay packet that will come out as a monthly average and will get paid out to you each month. So I'm just going to go through each element now. The first element is basic pay. So basic pay is for the nominal 40-hour working week, and it is the baseline to your salary. And so if you're working full-time, regardless of what placements you are doing, as a new F1 in Wales, you will get at least £41,400 each year. The pay scale here is reflective of the pay awards that has been imposed by Welsh Government, and this is what the figures will look like for now from August 2026. But it is just to say that the Welsh Resident Doctors Committee is in dispute over that pay award, and so these figures may be subject to change if we are able to negotiate a better pay settlement. But this is what you will be dealing with for the moment. And if you are part-time, then your basic pay will be calculated based on your average total hours per week. That will look different depending on what kind of rota you're on. And so if you are, say, doing 50%, but the original rota is on a 48-hour average pattern, then you would get paid on the basis of 24 out of 40 hours in terms of your basic pay. And so even though you are 50% in terms of your nominal training percentage, you'd actually get a bit more in terms of basic pay. And basic pay is very important, not only as a reliable baseline for your salary, but also because unlike all of your other forms of pay, this is pensionable. And you'll automatically be enrolled into the NHS pension scheme. That scheme is career average earnings based, and so the money that you earn in early on in your career very much does count, and because it will be subject to uprating and various other factors, it is very financially favourable to get higher pensionable pay as early as possible. And therefore, one of the things that we have done with this new pay scale is to consolidate it and simplify it, front load it, and put more money into basic pay. And not only will that boost your pension outlook, but it will help to financially support foundation doctors, particularly foundation doctors who may not be doing work beyond the 40-hour working week. When you progress to F2, you will move on to the F2 point, as shown here. So that is quite a jump in salary. And then if you stay in Wales after your foundation training, you will move on to the registrar part of the scale. And this bit of the scale is based on your years of service in the NHS. And so you can see that reflected in the year and the spine points. And so you move up a pay point with every 2 years of service. And critically, that is calendar year based. So even if you work part-time, you'll continue to progress normally through the pay scale. And any work that you do outside of training programs that is relevant will also be counted for these purposes. So if after foundation you go off and do an F3 and a substantive post as a clinical fellow, if you work abroad, if you go off and do research, if at some point during your training you take statutory leave, for example, maternity leave, then this all continues to get counted for pay progression purposes, so you will not be disadvantaged in any way. And essentially you will just keep on working your way through the registrar scale regardless of what you do until you finish your training in Wales. This is in very stark contrast to the grade-based pay system that you see on the 2016 contract in England, which relies on you progressing through by grade and having a more straightforward conventional training program in order to pay progress. The pay scale that we have designed here is much more reflective of what resident doctors actually typically do now across training. The new contract is notable because it's taken quite a break with the previous 2002 contract we did have, and it now uses an hours-based pay system, which is 4 main elements: basic pay, additional hours, out-of-hours top-up, and then any on-call payments for people who do non-resident on-call, and that will all add up to a total pay packet that will come out as a monthly average and will get paid out to you each month. So I'm just going to go through each element now. So the next element of your pay is additional hours. So while some foundation doctors and resident doctors in Wales will be working normal working weeks, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, the majority of resident doctors, including foundation doctors, will be on various kinds of shift and rota patterns that will very typically take them beyond 40 hours in any one week. And that includes part-time residents as well. As I said in the basic pay section, if you are part-time, then the additional work that you might do on various rota patterns gets calculated for the purposes of your basic pay. So you won't get an additional hours payment, you get higher basic pay instead, which, as I said previously, is quite advantageous from a pensionability perspective. But if you're full-time, it is perfectly possible for you to work more than 40 hours a week, and the way that this works for pay and rostering purposes is the average working hours that you do each week across the entire rota. And so your employer can potentially roster you for an additional 8 hours on average per week beyond the 40-hour working week. And that is defined by working time regulations. And essentially any time on average that you do beyond the 40-hour working week gets paid out as an additional hours top up, and that is based on the basic hourly rate. And that is up to the nearest 15 minutes in terms of the average as well. So you'll get your basic pay, and then you'll get this additional hours top up if you are full time and you're working beyond 40 hours on average a week. The new contract is notable because it's taken quite a break with the previous 2002 contract we did have, and it now uses an hours-based pay system, which is four main elements: basic pay, additional hours, out-of-hours top-up, and then any on-call payments for people who do non-resident on-call, and that will all add up to a total pay packet that will come out as a monthly average and will get paid out to you each month. So I'm just going to go through each element now. The next element is then the out-of-hours payment. So this is another top-up, and this is to reflect the antisocial nature of some of the work that you may be asked to do. We have a plain time definition, which, as shown here, is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m, Monday to Friday. And for plain time purposes, bank holidays are not considered plain time. They are considered antisocial. And so any hours that are worked outside of plain time get a 50% top up, so they're at 1.5 times the hourly rate. And so again, if you're full time working a shift pattern that involves nights, weekends, that goes beyond 40 hours a week, then you'll get your basic pay, you'll get your additional hours top up, and then you'll get an out of hours bonus on top of that as well, based on the number of hours. If you're part-time, you will get your basic pay, which will be based on your average total hours per week. And then again, you'll get this out of hours bonus if you're doing any hours that are outside of plain time. This is the plain time definition that we had in the 2002 contract. We managed to retain that. So this is exactly the same one that you see in Scotland and Northern Ireland. The plain time definition in England is less generous, unfortunately. So that is 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And it includes weekends. We managed to avoid that here, and we managed to retain the more generous plain time definition that we already had. The new contract is notable because it's taken quite a break with the previous 2002 contract we did have, and it now uses an hours-based pay system, which is four main elements: basic pay, additional hours, out-of-hours top-up, and then any on-call payments for people who do non-resident on-call, and that will all add up to a total pay packet that will come out as a monthly average and will get paid out to you each month. So I'm just going to go through each element now. And then the final element is non-residential on-call. This is less relevant to F1s, but I will talk through it anyway, as it's possible that you may go on to these rotas in future. So non-residential on-call is defined as being off-site, typically at home, but being available to return back to site or to provide telephone advice. And so it is something that you tend to see in more higher specialties and specialty training programs, but it's perfectly possible that you will work at least one NROC rota at some point in your career. Work that is conducted on site out of hours is also very often called on call, and it's quite common to hold an on call bleep as a doctor, but that is strictly defined as residential on call, so it's just treated as normal work. Non-residential on call is when you are off site. And essentially the way that a non-residential on call works is if there's any predictable work that is specified ahead of time. So it's quite common for you to do a normal shift in the day on a 24-hour NROC duty period, or to do ward rounds, or to come in briefly. That will all just get paid out as normal work as per the previous slides. But then outside of that, when you are available, and it's possible for you to be rung at any moment, each hour that you are on call for, you get an availability supplement for, which is half the normal hourly rate. And then if you are called, then you will be able to retrospectively claim that once your duty period is finished. So once you've finished your run of non-residential call work, you will be able to electronically make a claim of all of the work that you conducted out of the shift that you weren't already being paid for already. And the way that that payment works is that it gets topped up to the relevant hourly rates based on how much work you were doing. And if that was to place outside of playing time, it'll get paid at that antisocial rate as well. So this is a system that pays you for your availability, and then any actual work you do will get fully compensated. And there's an additional provision. So if you're doing a particularly busy shift and you end up working more than 75% of the on-call shift, then you'll just get paid out fully for the entire shift. The new contract is notable because it's taken quite a break with the previous 2002 contract we did have, and it now uses an hours-based pay system, which is 4 main elements: basic pay, additional hours, out-of-hours top-up, and then any on-call payments for people who do non-resident on-call, and that will all add up to a total pay packet that will come out as a monthly average and will get paid out to you each month. So I'm just going to go through each element now. So closely related to the pay systems, and particularly the non-residential on-call systems, is overtime. And so overtime is any time that you work beyond what you were rostered to do. And there can obviously be various reasons for that. You might stay late in order to secure patient safety, to complete urgent tasks that are not appropriate to hand over and that can't wait till the next working day, to take advantage of a unique training opportunity, for example, a rare procedure that is taking place outside of your rostered hours. There can be various reasons for doing it, and you will be able to claim that time back at the normal hourly rates, and you will do that electronically, much like an expense claim system. It will not involve your supervisor, it will not require any electronic proof, and you will then get paid out in the next payroll cycle. So this is a lot simpler and straightforward than the exception reporting system that you see in England, or the rota monitoring system that we used to have in Wales and that they still have in Scotland and Northern Ireland. And just to also assure that this overtime system is separate from other reporting systems as well. So this is very straightforwardly a way to pay you for work that you do beyond what you were rostered to do. So now we're going to go into the safety and training aspects of the contract, which are also very important, as well as pay. So the first thing that the contract introduces in this section is job planning. And job planning has 3 different elements in it. The first is your generic job plan. So you'll get that about 8 weeks before you start any postal placement. The generic job plan sets out what the rota cycle and typical working week looks like. It sets out the training objectives and the learning outcomes that you would typically expect to get from it. It lists any responsibilities that might be associated with the post beyond clinical duties as well. And it also sets out the safe minimum staffing levels for each type of shift involved in the post. And it also sets out something called educational development time. So as an F1 doctor, you need to have at least an hour a week that is set aside for you to do stuff for your portfolio. So for example, audits and quality improvements. That is very often bunched up together. So it may amount to an afternoon every few weeks, but that will all be set out in the generic job plan typically, as well as things like your F1 or teaching and the like. You'll get a duty roster that will come 6 weeks before you start the post, and so that is your individual and specific rota slot, and so that includes all of the specific shifts and the things that you will be working, and therefore it gives you an idea of what you'll be doing, and it therefore empowers you to be able to claim leave and get it approved after that point, although you do have an ability to request leave before you do get the duty roster if it's a particularly important event and you're giving a lot of notice. The last element is the personalised job plan. And so either before you start the post or within 4 weeks of starting the post, you would be expected to meet with your educational supervisor and your statutory education body. So in this instance, HIW will be sending you information on all of that, and your educational supervisor should introduce themselves. And the aim is for yourself and the educational supervisor to have a meeting. It could be virtual, it could be in person, either before or shortly after you start the post. And in that meeting, you can agree what your specific personalised job plan looks like, and that is essentially taking your roster and your generic job plan and making it specific to you. So there may be specific extracurricular things you have, there may be specific career things that you are interested in and that you want to obtain, there may be specific parts of your portfolio that you're looking to tick off at that point. This basically allows you to discuss all of that and agree it all with your educational supervisor. And so again, you're then empowered to seek out those training opportunities because it's been tied down in an agreed job plan. And this sets you up very nicely for something that you'll have to do throughout your career in terms of personal development plans, and then later on your job plan as a consultant or a GP or a specialty specialist doctor. You'll also have seen fines mentioned on the previous slide, and so basically an employer will get fined if a duty roster or generic job plan is late. That is being phased in from February 2027 rather than from August 2026. But it is just to say that when you are rotating in future, there should be a guarantee that all of your rosters and the like arrive on time, because otherwise the employer will get fined. The next element that we wanted to talk about was limits on working hours. These are all gains under the new contract, so this goes beyond what was in the 2002 contract, and they're similar to safety limits that you see in England as well. So just to give you a flavour, we've already discussed the working time regulations that mean you can't work more than 48 hours on average a week, but there's also rules around the number of shifts you can work in a row, the number of long shifts or nights that you can work in a row, when you are entitled to 46 or 48 hours mandatory rest, as well as limits to your weekend frequency. What we have got on the slide is just a snapshot of all of the stuff. There is a bit more detail besides this, and there are additional protections for people doing non-residential on-call, and it does look slightly different if you're working part-time as well. But all of that detail will be in the contract and will be up on the BMA web pages, and we're able to give advice on any of that. But this new set of working hour limits should result in much safer rotas than we were previously seeing in Wales, and that will better support your well-being. So I should also say that there can be exceptions for weekend frequency limits, very rarely. Those are set out in paragraphs 83 of the TCS and paragraphs 85 to 88. And essentially, there can be authorisation for a pattern with greater weekend frequency up to an absolute limit of 1 in 2. And that's if there is a clearly identified clinical reason by the relevant clinical director, the guardian of safe and flexible working agrees that the change is safe and appropriate, and the affected residents also agree with it, and the Resident Doctors Forum, including local BMA representatives, are happy to approve it as well. And these are kept under regular annual review with an ambition to get back to the normal weekend frequency limit. And there are similar provisions in place for the weekend frequency limits for flexible or part-time residents too. And relatedly, we are introducing an exception reporting system. So exception reporting has been in place in England for a while, but the critical thing with this is that this is completely separate to the matter of overtime. I discussed that earlier, and it is a completely separate system. So exception reporting in this instance is about exceptions to your job plan, and it is there in line in terms of safety. and training, essentially. So if you do not get your educational development time, if you miss teaching, if you are asked to work a shift and the number of staff is less than the specified minimum, if you're asked to cross cover, any of these things that are going above and beyond what is written down in your job plan, you will be able to exception report, and that can help to trigger various outcomes. Typically, it'll be actioned by your educational supervisor. You can get awarded additional educational development time or teaching opportunities. There can potentially be fines for the employer to incentivise them to make changes, or it may be that your job plan needs to be looked at, and the department need to tweak or change things around to ensure that you're getting what was agreed and what you need. So this is very much there not to pay for overtime, because that is essentially just additional work being done. This is there to protect you from variation in your job plan. And on this slide, we've got some examples of the kind of things that you could exception report for, and that would attract a resolution under that system. And this is all backed up by something called a Guardian of Safe and Flexible Working. So there'll be one in every health board. If you're working in the community, there'll be one based in NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership that oversees all resident doctors working in community settings. They monitor the overtime and exception reporting patterns. Typically, the overtime is a matter for your local department of payroll. Exception reporting is a matter normally for your educational supervisor. But the Guardian will keep track of the patterns, and they can be appealed to if you're not happy with the responses that you're getting. The Guardians can also implement fines of their own volition, and they can get involved if there are issues arising in certain localities and they're not being resolved. The Guardian also has an ability to convene a resident doctor forum, so there'll be one of these in every health board. The setup will be for resident doctors on the ground to determine, but typically any resident doctor can go, and it's a space that you can voice any concerns or issues that you have to the Guardian and to management in the health board, who can then take that away and hopefully secure changes and improvements. And a lot of the fine money that we've discussed, so say for late rotas or for exception reports or just issued by the Guardian, is for the resident doctor forum typically to decide how that money gets spent. And so typically it could be on training or teaching initiatives, it could be for well-being, it could be for additional facilities or making improvements to the doctor's mess. It's ultimately up to yourselves to determine how that fine money is spent. And the Guardian is also there to promote flexible training, so going part-time, as well as flexible working, and those flexible working entitlements are available to anyone, regardless of whether you're full-time or part-time. They are a statutory right, and so if there are certain things that you need to be available for example, childcare, caring responsibilities, then you can initiate that conversation with your employer, and the Guardian can help you in that and hopefully secure a solution that works for everyone. And I will just touch on transitional arrangements quickly. It's very straightforward for new foundation doctors coming to Wales, because they will just be put on the 2026 contract, and they will never work the 2002 contract, but just for yourselves to be aware of what else is going on in the system. So all foundation doctors, regardless if they're F1, F2, going into F2, will be on the 2026 contract from this August. And then unbanded specialties, so those are specialties that don't typically do any work beyond the normal working week. They will all transfer as well. There may be some other small groups that transfer in the coming year. And then from August 2027, anyone who is doing IMT, core surgical training, core psychiatry training, will be expected to transfer over, and remaining residents, so for example in run-through or higher specialty programs, will be able to transfer on a voluntary basis. And by August 2028, unless people are close to finishing or there are particular personal circumstances they have, they will all transfer onto the new contract by that point. There is pay protection available for anyone transferring, but as I've said, that's not particularly relevant for foundation doctors, so because you will never work the new contract. But it's just to say that this is what it will all look like. If you finish your foundation training and start a new training programme in this time in Wales, you will also just be on the new contract, and within the next couple of years we should see the 2002 contract completely phase out of Wales, and then it will just be the 2026 contract from then on. So since the contract was agreed in a referendum by members in December 2025, the committee's been working with NHS Wales employers to actually translate that framework agreement into a full contract, and this has been a very prolonged and complex piece of work. As part of that process, we were able to get a commitment for all of the rotas in Wales to become compliant with the new rostering safeguards from August 2026, and that's regardless of whether the residents on them are under the 2002 contract or the 2026 contract. In order to then facilitate that, we agreed to temporarily suspend some of the administrative deadlines ahead of August 2026 for this initial period of the transition. So that would be the timeline set out in the Code of Practice, for example, like the 8-week deadline for the job plan and the 6-week deadline for your duty roster. And we appreciate that this has been a temporary inconvenience for many, but just to assure that from the 1st of February 2027, all posts and placements are required to adhere to those deadlines, and there will be fines in place if you do not get your future rotas and future job plans in on time. And please note that this does not apply to any rest breaches that attract a financial penalty under paragraph 219 of the contract. In addition to the suspension of fines for missing some administrative deadlines, a more restricted agreement was also reached to relax departmental fines relating to some of the working limit requirements and job plan exception reports. Where a department is unable to meet a safe working rule, for example, because it doesn't have the staff to meet the new rota, there can be a relaxation of certain departmental fines. Those relaxations will be known as temporary derogations, and they are rota-specific, temporary and exceptional, and have to go through clear safeguards. The full details for all of this are set out in paragraphs 438 to 442 of the contract, and essentially this is a process that requires the involvement of the guardian, the residents affected, as well as the resident doctor forum and any local BMA resident doctor reps. These derogations can't be applied to the penalty rates you actually get as a resident for breaches of any safe working rules. So you will get the money to yourself individually. What these derogations apply to are some of the fines for the department that would go into the collective pot held by the guardian. This temporary derogation process has only been agreed for the first 6 months of implementation, and therefore for any posts, placements, rotations after or on the 1st of February 2027, there will be no further derogations granted. So it is a temporary process. And in return for the temporary derogation process that we've agreed, employers have confirmed that they will take all steps to address staffing gaps created by the new rostering safeguards. There is a commitment to respect the contractual requirements of other medical staff, in particular SAS doctors, and the lead guardian will coordinate and produce a report that will set out all of these additional rota gaps, which will inform the task and finish groups that we already have ongoing for training bottlenecks and for improving employment conditions for locally employed doctors. The last major point we wanted to discuss was leave. So we've modernised leave arrangements under this new contract, and so there's various things like shared parental leave, compassionate leave, bereavement leave, leave for exceptional events or circumstances that you are now entitled to, and that's all in the NHS handbook that you weren't necessarily entitled to before. In terms of the headline, which is annual leave, you get 28 days annual leave per year if you're full-time. If you're part-time, your leave, both annual leave and study leave, is based on a pro rata amount, and that is determined as much like your basic pay by your average total hours per week. And so if you're working part-time and it's quite an intense rota, if you're 50%, but you're actually working beyond 20 hours a week because of the various shift patterns, again, it's calculated based on your average total hours as a percentage of the 40-hour working week. So you'll get a bit more leave than if you were than 50% of the normal leave amount. But if you're part-time, typically it's prorated, and it's very often then taken in hours, and so you'll claim however many hours for each leave day that you want to take, just in order to simplify the leave arrangements. Once you have 5 years of reckonable NHS service, and that can include experience in other NHS roles from prior, or any F3 work, or substantive work that you do that's related. But once you have those 5 years, the annual leave allowance then rises to 33 days per year if you're full-time in Wales. And under the new arrangements, fixed leave is no longer allowed. So it had been phasing out, but we were still seeing patterns in Wales where people were told that there were certain leave weeks or they were assigned leave to take. This will no longer be the case. And generally, so long as it is a normal shift that is only in plain time, and you make the leave request at least 6 weeks in advance, it should be accepted, and the employer has a responsibility to respond positively to it. And there's also a provision there to be able to request leave well in advance of the rota being published. And so if you have big significant events that you are well aware of in advance, then you are now entitled to let the employer know about that when they're developing the rota and before they publish it, so that can be taken account of. So there's various other things around your terms and conditions to think about. So one is locum. You have to locum in your host employer as an F1 while you're provisionally registered with the GMC. But as you then become fully registered and progress, is possible for you to locum in various settings. Although under the 2026 contract, you are encouraged to offer your locum services to an NHS staff bank before you offer it anywhere else. Your actual physical contract will be sent to you, and it's got to be provided no later than the first day. Typically, this is all done electronically, and you will receive a cover sheet which will reference the national terms and conditions and set out a lot of the information about the post and employment well in advance from NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership, and we should have the final wording for the 2026 contract agreed and published before August 2026. The payday is normally on the 20th of the month or thereabout, and then you're paid for the whole month. And so, as I said in the pay section, that will be broken down into 3 payments for most people: your basic pay, your additional hours supplement, and your out of hours supplement. And if you do any non-residential on-call work, you'll get an additional line about any availability you've got for on-call. So that is what your pay slip will typically look like. And because it's based off the average of your rota, it will be the same amount for each month that you do a particular placement or rotation. Obviously, there are annual pay awards every year, and that will uplift the amounts, but typically you will just get a steady monthly payment, and then when you rotate, that may change slightly. You will get induction and shadowing as well, and we have managed to contractualize a lot of the induction elements as part of the new contract to ensure that various things about health and safety and rest and taking breaks and having leads and contacts available to you is all included. Typically you have a 4-day shadowing or induction period immediately starting your post. This is typically paid at the basic salary rates because you are just working a normal working week typically in that period, but you will get paid for it. Hospital accommodation in Wales is free for F1s, so that is a significant benefit that we retained. It is also now going to be subject to accommodation standards as per the contract as well. And so if you do get any issues with your accommodation, please do flag it to us, because it's something that we can challenge contractually now. And the standards that have been agreed to are actually quite high and considerable and set out. So if you're dissatisfied with your accommodation anyway, then we are able to fight that on your behalf. The free accommodation is a taxable benefit. So whilst you will get it, it is just to say that you may get a tax bill or adjustment for it. So it may not come across quite free, but it's certainly a lot cheaper than going to the private rental sector, for example. There's study leave as well. So as an F1, you get 15 days of study leave each year. That is used for regular teaching and training sessions. So typically that's all booked in well in advance, so it's not discretionary study leave per se. You do get 30 days study leave when you are an F2 or above, and although in various training programs a lot of that is also top sliced in order to put on training or teaching days for you, you will have an ability to use that study leave on a discretionary basis when it's available for things like courses, conferences, or private study for exams. And you'll also get a discretionary study budget in that context, which you'll be able to use to support things like conference fees or course fees or travel or accommodation, for example. And if you are an academic F1 or F2, then you may also get access to a study budget ahead of that. And all of this is covered in the study leave policy from wherever deanery you're in typically. And so in Wales, that will be the HIW study leave policy, and it should all be set out. The NHS has sick pay provisions as well, and they are generous, and they will depend on the length of service. So typically, as an F1, unless you've got continuous service in the NHS leading into it, your sick pay contractually will be 1 month's full pay followed by 2 months half pay, but then you go to statutory sick pay and then eventually to nil. But as you work for longer in the NHS, your sick leave provisions become more generous, although it is just a flag that if you break your employment. So, for example, you finish your foundation program and then go abroad for a significant period of time, your sick pay provisions will reset if you then come back. And then finally, you'll automatically be enrolled in the NHS pension. The NHS pension scheme is a defined benefit contribution. So the final payment that you get for your pension when you take it out is based on the pensionable pay that you earn each year, and that will be uplifted by inflation plus 1.5% each year. It's a career average earning scheme, as I've said previously, so it is in your interests to keep earning pensionable pay in the NHS pension scheme and to see it all counted out for out. Again, if you take a significant break from employment, it may be the case that your NHS pension is frozen until you rejoin and start earning pensionable pay again. Your employer and yourself will pay contribution rates for your pensionable pay, and that is effectively to pay for the pension payouts of current retirees, and then obviously when you retire, the current people working on the pension scheme will effectively be paying for your pension payouts. The last thing just to say on these pension and taxation matters is that a lot of the payments that you have to make as a doctor are actually subject to tax relief, and so any medical indemnity that you get, your GMC registration fees, any Royal College fees that you pay, and importantly your BMA membership subscription, typically you will be able to get tax relief on all of that, and therefore effectively get money back. And on any pension or taxation matters, and there is a lot of information out there, and you can obviously obtain financial advice to help you with any of that. This last slide is just to show differences between the 2002 contract that we used to have and is still present in Northern Ireland and Scotland, as well as the 2016 contract that is in England, and the proposed contract that we will be getting in Wales from August 2026. And so a lot of this information I've already covered, but generally you can see that the Welsh contract goes further on various things like safety limits, and it manages to retain some of the best aspects of the 2002 contract, like the plain time definition or the pay progression system, but it's then been able to move to an hours based pay system, which is more generous than the one seen in England, and importantly allows for direct overtime pay claims, rather than the exception reporting system in England or the old rota monitoring system that was in place for the 2002 contract, and had proved very difficult for resident doctors to properly engage with and utilise. And that is it in terms of the presentation. So diolch yn fawr iawn. We have a lot more information about the contract and F1 work and pay, etc. in general on the website. You're more than welcome to contact us on the generic email here if you have any questions. And if you're not already a BMA member, then we would obviously recommend that you join the majority of doctors and become a member. The more members that we have, the more we can collectively achieve and organise and win together. This new contract has stemmed out of our membership. It is the members who helped us win and agree this contract, and the various pay awards that we've been able to win as part of our pay campaign. And the BMA also offers a range of member services that are very valued as well. So, diolch yn fawr iawn.